You see it, you like it, you pay for it, and then it arrives and it's not quite what you signed up for. The issue that arises is, what are your legal rights? And in Ghana's fast-growing digital space, are you really protected? Welcome to Litigator's Lens of B&P's Associates Community First podcast, where we discuss legal and social issues that matter to the community. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues and legal associates, Christian Kunedu Odame, Abna Ajiwa Asare, and Peter Kosi Simpson. And together, we will be unpacking the legal realities behind online transactions in Ghana. What works, what doesn't, and what you need to know to stay protected. My name is Mami Ifya from Pomajura. Stay tuned for the rest of the episode. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the interesting things I read, which would anchor today's discussion, is that about approximately 15 million internet users in Ghana are buying something, a product online every day. And this is quite interesting because you would realize that we've moved from a system where a lot of people are going to shops to purchase, and now everything from dresses to food, every single thing is being purchased online. And so I'm sure our audience would be very interested to know what their rights are in such online transactions. Christian, before we delve into the heavy stuff, why do you think that online transactions have increased in such a short period of time?
Okay, thank you very much, Mami. So I will tackle it before COVID, people generally engaged in what we call the traditional buying and selling. So you go to the physical shop, you want to buy a dress, you pick the dress, and then you pay for it. Then there was COVID. Then we had things like lockdown. And then so people were forced to stay in their homes. You were compelled, if you want to buy something, you must necessarily do it by buying it online because you can't go. And then there's also those who didn't want to go because they just simply didn't want to come into contact with infected persons so they don't contract COVID-19. So it was first because of safety. I want to be safe, and because maybe it was necessary. Then people realized the more they use it, it was convenient. It was comfortable because then I'm in my home. I can order anything and it's brought to my doorstep. Contactless. I don't talk to anybody. I get exactly what I ordered for. So people
do you always?
Oh, more often than not, people. There are the incidents where people don't get what they ordered. I mean, there was a trend where people say what I ordered and what I got.
I think we will do that trend here before we get into it.
I look forward to it.
Yes.
I think some people have very interesting stories to tell. So so it was mainly safety. Then people realized it was convenient because now you can sit in your office right now and then order something and it's brought to your doorstep. So that is mainly the why. There's a set, and also there's the how. So there's payment systems have been made very seamless now. So right now there's Momo. Almost everyone, we have a huge percentage of Ghanaians with Momo accounts, so you can just Momo it, send somebody money. Then there's also now businesses. Almost everybody has a social media account. You are seeing your friends selling something online. So now, because of easy access to internet, we all have social media accounts. Sellers are aggressively developing online presence. So whatever you want to buy, you can directly contact a buyer, a seller, and then buy it. So because of this, let's say, generally advancements in technology, advance of social media, easy access, having an account where people are, I think now it is easier. The process is seamless. Anything you want, as you said, there's a buyer selling it online for you to buy. So generally, that is what is accounting for this surge since COVID-19. Since COVID-19.
Okay. And since you talked about what I ordered versus what I got, I don't think we have to leave that topic just yet. And I'm sure we all have some interesting experiences of what I ordered and what I got. Anyone wants to share, at least to open our viewers to know that they are not in this walk alone.
I think recently, it was something I talked about in the office a lot. I ordered a laptop stand, and I think I'll say this was on me because before I pushed purchase or clicked on the purchase tab, I didn't check the dimensions once again. And so when it came, it was too small for my laptop. And so now I repurposed this into an iPad stand. But then that's very much an issue of what I ordered versus what I got. Right? So sometimes it's not always the the sellers, but it's also us, the buyers as well.
Yeah, that's quite true. I think so. My husband wanted to get, or I wanted to get a bookshelf. And then my husband was crazy about Temu at the time. So goes to Temu to get like a bookshelf. And when the thing came in, the bookshelf was so like, this was the whole size of the bookshelf. And I think it was also an issue of not reading the dimensions. So whilst this particular conversation will be about the buyer, but I think sometimes it's also on the buyer a bit, not reading dimensions and all of that. So to have this discussion, we have a very interesting scenario, and that scenario would aid us in discussing the issues that comes up with online transaction. So please do follow us whilst we read the scenario. So Amma is scrolling through Instagram, one of the most popular places we go to, Instagram, Temu, and websites, when she spots what looks like a great deal, a slightly used UK iPhone 16 Pro Max from a vendor called Darlington's Phone GH. The phone is advertised as being in excellent condition, fully functional, and even comes with a 1-month warranty. She reaches out via DM, gets a few photos, and after some back and forth, agrees to buy it for 6,500 Ghana cedis. Payment is made through mobile money, quick and easy. No invoice, no formal receipt, just the usual confirmation message received. 3 days later, the phone arrives, but almost immediately things feel off. The battery health is poor, the camera doesn't work properly, the storage is lower than advertised. It may have been refurbished or worse, Amma is thinking to herself. So Amma contacts the seller, that's Darlington Phones GH. The response, very defensive. Darlington GH says that the phone was fine before they dispatched it to Amma. And so Darlington GH denies any responsibility and offers a discounted repair instead of a refund. Amma then begins to dig deeper and finds other online complaints about Darlington Phones GH. The seller's page no longer exists. It has been renamed or it doesn't exist. But now she's left wondering, what are her rights and what can she realistically do? And so I'm sure there are lots of Ammas watching us right now who have probably tried to purchase a dress, a device, a product, and have seen very nice advertisements and have purchased it and subsequently have had issues. So let's try and have this discussion in light of online transactions that happen in Ghana. So I just want to start it off. What should Amma first be thinking of in all of these things in terms of any attempt to obtain legal remedy? What's the first thing that bridge would have to cross before we can proceed?
Well, in this case, to determine whether there's any cause of action, you have to first look at whether there was a valid contract of sale.
Okay.
Right? That would include a seller that's offering the phone and has agreed to sell the phone to Amma at a certain price, which is the consideration mainly for the contract for sale of goods. It must be a price that should be paid partly or wholly in money or cash. Then also a buyer that's willing to buy at that price. So considering the communication between Amma and the Darlington phones, there has been some form of an offer. Amma first saw the ad and offered that, oh, I want this price. The offer came with certain representations, which we'll come back to later. But the seller agreeing to sell the phone to Amma at the price shows that a valid contract actually was formed between the parties. And I'll also say that the formation of the contract comes with a type of good or raises questions about the good in respect of which the contract is formed, whether it was for a specific good or one of many goods. And this determines which rights the parties would have, what would be the obligations of the parties in respect of the contract that is formed.
Okay. So I would like to come back to that point in a bit, but still on the contract, let's assume that Amma saw the phone and then instead of continuing the conversation via DMs, she rather calls the telephone numbers, which would be very common, where you see that on Instagram or on the website, they may say that you can call this number to place your order. So assuming Amma makes a call and does not conclude this conversation via DMs, would it still be a contract that, can we still say that a contract was concluded or not?
Oh, yes. Yes. So, I mean, under the law, there are essential requirements of a contract. As Peter said, there must be an offer, there's an acceptance, then consideration. Essentially, I must get something for what I am offering to you. So it can be in the form of money or in kind. That's what the law refers to as consideration, as in the price for the offer made by the person. And then there's capacity. By capacity, basically, the law has prescribed there's a certain age requirement at which you are allowed to legally enter into a contract. Now, if all these essential requirements are present, so a contract can be entered into orally or in writing. So many times people tend to feel that if we don't reduce it into a formal legal document, this is what I'm offering to you, this is the price at which I am buying it, then there's no contract, no. So long as an offer was made, so in this case, an offer to sell the property, that phone, she agreed to buy it at that price. So there is an offer, there was an acceptance, and then there's the consideration, which is the money, that's 6,500?
Yes.
Then both of them, the fact doesn't say whether they are below the age requirement, but then we assume that they are capable of entering into a contract and are of legally sound mind. If these essential elements exist, I mean, there's no vitiating factor like fraud, representation, and those things. Notwithstanding the fact that maybe let's say Amma continue the conversation over the phone. If all these elements we have listed exist, then we'll say a contract was entered into between Darlington and then Amma.
Okay, so I'm glad.
I just want to add that even per our statutes, we have the Electronic Transactions Act, which specifically provides that when it comes to a valid contract, even if the contract is partially or in whole completed via an electronic medium, it's still a valid contract. So that's just adding on to what has already been said regarding contract formation. Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. I just wanted to the fact that Christian we touched on capacity. So say right now, the hard truth is many teenagers are currently on social media, and it would not be uncommon to find a 15-year-old use his or her social media platform to try and purchase a phone. So let's assume that Amma is of age, right? But Amma had a 15-year-old son who wants to impress some students at inter-colleges this this season. And so he knows that, he cannot get the 17, but at least a clean 16 Pro Max will do the trick at the inter-colleges. And so he uses his mom's phone and then attempts to contract with Darlington GH. Does this change possibly whether or not the contract would have would be valid?
The thing is, when it comes to minors entering into these type of contracts, so when it comes to a contract for the sale of goods, it's a type of specialized type of contract, and our laws have special rules regarding contracts for the sale of goods or contracts of the sale of goods as is written in the Act. And for this case, when it comes to minors, even though ordinarily general rules, they don't have capacity, the law has created an exception. So when it comes to necessaries, right, then that agreement will be voidable in that until that minor decides that they are going to bring or terminate that agreement, it's still a valid contract and it can still move on. That's why we're saying it's voidable. It's not void completely. Now, that means that we have to see whether or not this phone falls within the definition of what a necessary is in the Act. So it has to be something that meets the standard or his station in life, right? Son's station in life. And it must be, at the time that it's delivered to him, it must meet his requirements or the requirements or his needs. And so if he's able to establish, right, or the seller is able to establish, because in this case, the seller will be trying to say it's a valid contract, he has to pay me, or Amma has to pay because probably someone wouldn't have the money for that, then they would have to establish that, okay, this phone falls under necessaries in the context of the Sale of Goods Act, and therefore I'm entitled to this payment. But the thing is, even with that, I think under the Act, it's about payment of a reasonable price and not necessarily what
you had
the seller had quoted, right? And so that is another issue that comes up. So you have to be vigilant about the people you are selling to online as a seller.
Exactly. So that means that as a seller, you may want to be asking, what's your age before you proceed with before you proceed. So this is just something for the sellers. But let's go back to our scenario. So we are back to Amma, who is, so at this point we are proceeding on the assumption that Amma is a person of age to enter into a contract, and looking at the fact scenario, we have agreed that there is a valid contract. Now let's talk about the issues of what I got, what I ordered, and what I got. So the advertisement that was placed was a slightly used UK iPhone 16 Pro Max. Also, I'm sure the caption was what had in excellent condition, fully functional, and comes with a 1-month warranty. So that's the advertisement that was put out there. Now, Amma says that what she received was a phone with a battery health that was poor, the camera wasn't working properly, and then the storage was lower than advertised. Would the issues of how the adverts was placed out and the words that were used, would that be an issue for which Amma can see that the representations that were made and what I received, so there's an issue of a misrepresentation, or what happens in that kind of a scenario?
Well, back to my initial point when I was trying to talk about the classification of goods and the duties and obligations that each party would have with respect to the contract for the sale or purchase of that good. Generally, the law is that when you enter into a contract for the sale of a specific good, and specific good is that the identity of the good is ascertained at the time of the contract, then the seller has a fundamental obligation to deliver to the buyer that specific good. So once that specific good is not delivered, then there's a breach of that fundamental obligation, which will entitle the buyer to certain remedies. I'm sure we will talk about remedies later. And also sometimes the sale is by description or by samples. So at the time of the contract, the specific good has not yet been identified or determined. In such a case, the fundamental obligation will be for the seller to deliver a good that substantially corresponds to the description or the sample by which the sale was advertised, or by which the sale was described, like the description that was made online. And when that also does not happen, then there's a breach of a fundamental duty which will entitle the buyer to certain remedies. This is where it becomes tricky when it comes to online transactions.
Yes.
Because you are unable, maybe you may be able to ascertain that this is a specific item I want to purchase, and you'll be able to insist that I must be delivered with that specific item. But that would depend on the circumstances of the transaction, back and forth, you confirming the specificity of the item. So that it's not just you ordering one of many items that will be delivered to you. So in certain cases, it may be easier to establish that I am entering into this contract for a sale of this specific thing. In this case, this specific iPhone. I may be requesting for certain details that will help me to identify a specific iPhone, maybe some product number or something. But in the absence of that, you may not be able to really establish whether the contract is in respect of a specific phone.
Yeah.
And this will change the obligations that are owed to you by the buyer and your rights that will come, when there's a breach of those obligations.
Okay, so let's pick exactly what was posted. So what was posted was slightly used UK iPhone 16 Pro Max. Would we say that reference or that description is specific enough as compared to if it was slightly used UK iPhone 16 iPhones or slightly used UK iPhones? Like, even though it's a 16 Pro Max, but it's iPhones, is the use of slightly used UK iPhone 16 Pro Max specific enough, or it will still be an unascertained good, especially it being on social media as well? Because in a physical shop, you can point to this product and say, this is the product that I want. This is the good that I want. But if I sell iPhones and I post the image of one of the iPhone 16s and I say, I sell iPhone 16 Pro Max. So if you want an iPhone 16 Pro Max, it's a slightly used iPhone 16 Pro Max. I don't know. I don't think that would be specific enough, but what do you guys think?
I think that when it comes to, especially when it comes to online trading like this, or online commerce or e-commerce, it's come to a point where I agree with you that sometimes the specificity of what the product is, because most of these online sellers may not have this background information or the fact that you have to be this specific about the goods. That's why I think to a large extent, the law also considers things when it comes to how things work in the real world or the context of it. I think in these unique circumstances, I, as a buyer or a layperson who is online and scrolling and I see that, should have that level of, should be able to confidently or comfortably say, this is a specific iPhone, slightly used iPhone 14 Pro Max, 16 Pro Max that you're speaking about, because that's the picture that is there. Even though legally, we as lawyers would probably say that might not be as specific as you'd require, I think as a layperson, you should be able to look at that and say, because most of the time you text them or you DM them or you call them and you say, I want this one, the one in the picture. And so that's a specific item I am pointing at and saying, that is what I want. And so once that has happened, you have ascertained what that good is and it becomes a specific good. So if you're selling me something, it should be that slightly used one you're taking the picture of and you're selling online.
Okay. So say, sometimes during the ad on WhatsApp, they probably would take it out from the box and maybe turn it around and all of that. So let's say you just sent in the DM, I want this. But the video they were showing did not have, let's say, a dent on one side of the phone or a scratch on the back. So you have a video. They were turning the phone. I've used UK iPhone 16, so all of that. And then when you come, what you have has a dent at the back. Now, the message or the offer I sent to Darlington Phone or the buyer would have been, I want this, which means that, or which presupposes that I wanted a specific phone, which is the one that you were videoing or showing on your screen. And then what comes to me has this dent at the back or this scratch at the back.
Yeah.
Would it be enough for me to show the video? This is the video you showed. The video did not have any dents at the back or any scratch at the back. And this is what I received. I wanted a specific good, but what she gave to me was different from what I saw. Would I raise that issue of specific? And yes.
You see, mommy, what you said, and then flowing from what Abina and Peter said, I think the requirements regarding specific goods, you be the buyer. You should be able to identify that. And then we both agree that this is the one I'm buying from you. Then it makes it specific. That's my understanding of it. Unless, because it's the iPhone 16 you are advertising. You took it out. Do you understand? And then you give the descriptions. I have seen it on maybe your status, and so I DM'd you that I've seen this iPhone, the exact one you are advertising. You mentioned the various characteristics, maybe storage-wise, but I've seen it. Then we agree that this is the one I'm buying from you. So I want to buy this one that you've advertised. The obligation will be to deliver the exact thing we agreed on. Then it makes it specific, right? But if it becomes one of many goods, like you said, I have iPhone 16. They are all 512 gigabytes. They have this and this and this. Then it's generally the description I have given. So when it's coming, I must get a good that corresponds substantially with the description you gave. But if I have seen it and we both agreed that this is the iPhone I'm buying from you. So in this case, I think they agreed on it was only one phone. Or he just mentioned that.
Yeah.
He shared photos as well. He mentioned that he shared photos as well.
Yes, he shared photos.
So then there was an agreement as to the photo. She was satisfied with the photographs.
Yes, because it says that she reaches out via DM, gets a few photos, and after some back and forth, agrees to buy it for 6,500.
So I believe then it was incumbent on, then it became a specific group because then it has been ascertained. She had identified and they agreed that what he had advertised to her or shown to her, the photograph, is exactly what she was buying. So the obligation, as Peter said, the fundamental obligation would be to deliver the exact thing they had, which she saw and she was satisfied with, for which she agreed to purchase same from Darlington. That's my understanding of it.
Well, I would say that given the difficulty in reaching whether the good was specific or was ascertained at the time of the contract, which we have all experienced now, it's not new, because sometimes even the courts, they have to struggle to make that determination whether at the time of the contract that the good was specific or unascertained. And even if they determine that it was unascertained at the time of the contract, the very time or the point in time that it becomes ascertained is something that even the courts sometimes find it, or they struggle to determine. So in certain cases, they may now be skewing towards whether what you have received is fit for purpose or has maybe the quality that was represented to you at the time of contract. And that is also some of the obligations that may come with the categories of good, whether what you are buying is fit for the purpose for which you are buying it. That's if you make the purpose known at the time of entering into the contract. Or generally, the courts may want to determine, in this case, whether slightly used iPhones will reasonably be expected to have certain qualities, for which if there's some derogation from that, then certain remedies may be available to you. So even without being sure whether it was specific or unascertained good, you may also be leaning towards fit for purpose or the qualities that you got to make or to determine what remedies that the law may offer.
Even as unascertained, the qualities he described, it must substantially correspond. The question is whether what she got and what Darlington described, does it substantially correspond to what Darlington described?
Okay, so let's do a comparison. So Darlington advertised slightly used UK iPhone 16 Pro Max, which is in excellent condition, fully functional. And she says that what she received was an iPhone 16 Pro Max, all the same. However, the battery health was poor, the camera didn't work properly, and the storage was lower than advertised. That's what Amma is claiming. So in this circumstance, are we leaning more towards the fact that it did not meet the description, even though, assuming we are saying that it was not specific, so it was unascertained, would we say that it did not meet, but it's a slightly used iPhone 16 Pro Max? Would you be expecting a top-notch battery health?
I think the thing here is the seller used certain words, which is where the red flags come up. You said it was in excellent condition and fully functional. This, before I even go deeper into applying the law to what was said by the seller, we have to go back to the Act. My colleagues have already said a lot on that, but the law is very specific, right? There's the whole caveat emptor. I'm sure we all dealt with that, and there's multiple exceptions when we're studying commercial law. There's caveat emptor, which basically means that the buyer must beware. And essentially,
my people would like to understand.
Essentially, in the law, we are told, the statute is clear that ordinarily, there's no obligation on the seller for the quality to be of a particular standard or for it to be fit for a particular purpose. But there are so many exceptions, which basically means that sellers have to be wary of what they are selling, because if you fall under any of the exceptions, the person who is buying from you, the buyer, can just sue you for that. So in this scenario, we have a good that has been described with certain words. And so once it is described with certain words, it falls under an exception, which is that if you have described it if it's being sold by description, then there's an implied obligation on you to make sure that those goods are fit for purpose, and that whether that fit for purpose is express or implied. So it's one of those exceptions to that caveat emptor rule that in this scenario, it is in the ordinary course of your business. You said the business is Darlington Phones GH. I can assume that in the ordinary course of your business, you sell phones. And so you're selling me this phone in the ordinary course of your business. So moving forward, it's the ordinary course of your business, number one. You have described the goods a particular way, excellent condition, fully functional. And you have even gone on so you can give me 1 month warranty, which means you are confident in the good they are selling me. So that means that whatever good they are giving to me should be of a good enough quality and should be fit for purpose. And that fit for purpose, it doesn't have to be me. As I said, it doesn't have to be express. It can also be implied. What do you need a phone for? You need to be able to use it for a period of time. So if there's very low battery health, you're saying that battery health was significantly degraded, then that means that that's already one mark off. It's not in excellent condition. It's not fully functional because the battery is very low. Every time I have to be charging, it's a mobile phone. As my sister always says, when I don't pick up her calls, it's a mobile phone. I'm supposed to be able to carry it along. So if I'm carrying this and the battery is not as severely
plug and play.
Exactly, it's a plug and play phone. It's not fit for purpose. It's not functional. You're telling me that it is fully functional. And then we are going on to that the camera doesn't function properly. Okay, with that one, we can say that's not a usual function of a phone, but it is an iPhone 14 Pro Max. Not even just an iPhone 14, a Pro Max. We all know, or I don't say it's right because we know how that works in the glass field.
Please, the Androiders, you cannot shame us.
But we all know that I think in our generation or where we've reached in time, the camera quality of a phone or the functionality of a camera is one of the things people want when they are purchasing a smartphone.
Yes.
If I didn't want to use the camera, because the camera doesn't goes beyond with just taking pictures or taking videos. Sometimes you need to scan a QR code to do something. You need to use your camera. So if you're telling me that the camera doesn't function properly, it's not fit for purpose, and you told me it's fully functional. And then we go on and saying that the storage capacity is lower than expected. So all these things, you have told me something. It is excellent condition. It is fully functional. Now it's essentially plug and play, and I can't use the camera for anything.
Can you imagine going to a wedding and trying to scan the QR code and everyone is waiting for you to move so that they could also scan it? So your slightly used iPhone 16 is not scanned.
So all of these are parts of the reason why we say that at this stage, you have sold me something with a particular description. And I think in this situation, the law is definitely on the buyer side, because if you look at all these elements in line with what the law has said, all these exceptions to the general rule that the seller has no obligation, in this scenario, you have an obligation because you've told me specific things, gone on to show me specific pictures. Please.
I see Peter is
No.
it's
Just to add to what Abena was saying, even though there were not like any agreement on the specifications, for example, what the storage capacity should be, what the camera quality would be, or the battery health would be, the fact that you merely describe the phone as slightly used will give some reasonable expectation with which or against which you will be judged, right? So it's a slightly used iPhone supposed to have a very low battery health. No, it's slightly used. So at least, even though it's not in an excellent condition, should be just okay. Fit for the description, slightly used.
Especially with the UK, because I realized that now too they do that distinction.
Yeah.
The adverts usually
The UK use.
give the UK use, and their prices are also different. So
Exactly. So even though we have not agreed on specifics, you must be judged against something, which is what reasonably would be expected of that description that you gave. So you may argue that, I didn't say so and so, I didn't say that, but what would a reasonable person to whom you are making that representation think or expect from that phone? And that is the standard by which you'll be judged.
okay, interesting. So let's move a bit to one issue that I find very interesting, where Amma meets the seller, right, and says, Mr. Darlington phone GH, this your phone is not it's it's not given. And so she's asking further questions. Now Darlington says that, please hold on. When I delivered the phone to be dispatched to you, everything about the phone was okay. Let me try and get that part again. So the seller insists that the phone was fine before dispatch. And so based on that, he's denying any responsibility that comes. Now, this particular part is very interesting because of how goods are delivered online. Because unlike previously where you maybe would go to a shop and you pick it and then that is it, that issue of delivery is a very big part of the online transaction. And so we can't have this conversation without that element. Whose risk is it in this instance? Assuming I do not think that a slightly used 16 Pro Max in 3 days when it's being discharged, its battery health could magically reduce to one that is very deteriorated. But let's assume that the product is one that can easily be destroyed within a dispatch period. What happens? Whose risk is it when such goods are being delivered for the purposes of online transaction?
Okay, so there's a general rule when it comes to the transfer of property in goods, the transfer of risk in goods. So when I say the transfer of property, I mean the transfer of ownership in the goods. Of course, when the seller has it, it's their good. And then when they transfer the ownership to the buyer, then the buyer becomes the buyer's good. So the first thing to notice is that usually ownership flows with risk. So once you become the owner, the risk is still with you. But obviously, because of, as you're saying, carriage problems or courier services, someone has to deliver the good from you to somebody. At a point, the seller will not have control. There are exceptions within the law. So because of the fact that there's party autonomy and parties can determine whatever they want to agree when it comes to contracts, you will notice that in our laws, it's usually said, we usually have unless the parties otherwise agree. And so a seller can decide that they're going to transfer the risk in the goods. So when we say transfer risk, that means if anything happens to the goods in transit, if there's any defect, it gets destroyed. As they're saying, maybe not for maybe something perishable, rice, Rice really perishes. Maybe some mangoes or something like that. If it perishes on its way, it's not my fault anymore. If anything happens to it, then it's up to you. You will deal with all the damage, all the loss that comes from that damage to the goods. So ordinarily, the general rule is that property passes with risk, which means that once the seller has transferred that property to the buyer, it becomes their issue when it's an issue with delivery. Okay. Now, property usually also happens when there's delivery. So once you have paid, you become the owner. It's now my property, and then we deliver it to you. And so that's where those nuances are, because unfortunately, with these online sellers, they don't really have those clear terms. When we are drafting agreements, we are always cautious of that because we know that the effects or the implications of who carries risk at what time. So when I'm drafting an agreement, or any of us is drafting an agreement, it's something that we'll look at first. Who has risk when the goods are in transit? When does property pass? Is it when you pay the price, or is it after you've paid the price? Because there are so many general rules in common law and in our statutes as well. But in this scenario, we now have things where people are selling and buying without these specific rules. And so the general rules have to apply, which would be that the seller will say, once the goods are delivered to you, it's your property. You've paid for them. It's your property. So once there's property in your possession, that means that you also have the risk. If anything happens to the goods, it's not my problem. But someone will also say, no, the property was supposed to pass to me once you deliver it to me. And so the time that the carrier is moving with the goods, all that time is still your risk. You are still at risk when it comes to the goods. And so that entire duration of when it's with the carrier, the delivery man on his motorcycle, or if you're using Yango boats, etc., the car, as we know,
and
with our pigs, and the bicycles that you are using now, and the bicycles, whatever happens to the good, someone will say, no, I will get that ownership when you deliver it to me. So whatever happens in that time is with you, the seller. And then that's where the issue comes in, because they are not specifying these rules when they are making their agreement. When it's a usual written agreement, and that's why you also need a lawyer to trust your agreement, because a lay person may not be cognizant of this issue, but we would be the ones looking at it and saying, who is getting the risk at what time? But it's not always the case when it comes to online transactions. And that's where the problem comes, because who has the risk when it's traveling from the seller to the buyer?
Yeah, just to add to what Abena was saying, even though there may not be clear terms as to when property will pass and when risk will pass, if you go with the flow of the transaction, you may be able to determine when the property will pass. Like he was saying, the general rule is that once it is delivered to the buyer, then it is at that point that property passes to the buyer and the risk will pass with that property. The question now is when is it delivered to the buyer? Mm-hmm. That's when you bring in the third-party delivery person, right? So you have to determine whether that delivery person, is it an agent or the bailee of the buyer or the seller? Because I ordered something, I was like, oh, my delivery person will pick it up. So at the time of pickup, when it is being given to the delivery person that I sent, then definitely property has passed because the delivery person is now my agent. So picking on my behalf. So
the delivery is the buyer's.
Yes, I sent the delivery to pick up the phone. So in this case, then property would have passed when he picked up the property. So anything that happened to the group in transit to me, it's my fault. Now, depending on the contract that you have with the bailee, you may also be able to hold that person liable for damage and recover something. In the other scenario, when the delivery person is an agent of the seller, for example, I told the buyer, payment upon delivery. Mm-hmm. So right from pickup till it is delivered, property is still with the seller. So it is when I finally receive it at my destination or my address, that property, that good that you are buying will pass to me and risk will pass with the property. So when something happens...
I have a question.
Let me just finish my So when something happens in transit, then still the seller still has property, therefore has the risk, because whoever is bringing it is the seller's agent. Mm-hmm. I get it when it is delivered to me. So it is at the time of delivery that I get the risk and get the property as well. So it's a bit nuanced, depending on the arrangement. All these are also subject to agreement. The parties may agree specifically when property in the goods will pass and when the risk could be transferred.
But in this scenario, the parties are silent. So we are going by the general.
Yeah.
Are we saying that if by virtue of, let's say, you engage in a rider to pick it up, I mean, you, the seller, you have, let's say, I request maybe Bolt. I order Bolt's delivery to pick up the item from my end and then deliver it to the buyer. By virtue of requesting or making that order from Bolt, the driver becomes my agent?
So to speak, or because it then becomes unfair to the seller to still see that the risk is, I am still bearing the risk when I do not have control of the agent or the person whom is making the delivery. So it's more of a risk that the seller is taking on as compared to the buyer Because if it's your agent, the Bolt rider picking up the good for you, it's your agents picking it up for you.
Because you would have hired the carrier.
Yeah.
So now the carrier is answering to you, not to the seller. So at that stage, the courier agreement is between you and the carrier. So whatever terms arise from that relationship would be applicable to you, or you would benefit from it, or you would be liable for any terms of that carrier agreement, because it's not the seller that instructed the carrier.
Yeah.
But you did.
So we are saying that notwithstanding the terms of the agreement with the carrier, right, or the courier, it will be deemed in substance an agency agreement?
Well, yes, in that case, because you are the final buyer of the goods, and there's this person who is just in between, has a specific role of conveying the goods to you. That person in that case is unknown to the seller. But what he knows is that you are sending someone to pick it up. So once I've delivered to that person, I have delivered to you. Ordinarily, unless there are express agreements that no, the risk of property will pass when it gets to me safely, and two of you have agreed on those terms. Once it is delivered to someone you've sent, who is your agent, then delivery is done when you go by the general rule.
Christian's okay was okay. It was okay.
Well, I mean, you mentioned your other question, but before we go into your question, I just want to add on to what Peter was saying, because it brings to mind the issue with these collection points when it comes to these electronic transactions and these online stores. So I think this issue has come up for discussion before when it comes to Temu, for example. They have collection points in Accra. They're supposed to send this on their website. It says, key in your address, and then the goods will be delivered to you. But then it comes to Ghana, and then whoever is supposed to deliver the good, the carrier is saying, come to our collection point, right? And so for them, delivery has been done once it reaches the collection point. But when on the website, I was saying, I've keyed in my address and I chose to say that I want you to deliver it to this address, which means that there's a conflict between what was agreed between the parties and what is actually happening. Because at this stage, they will send you that message that your goods have been delivered once it reaches the collection point. Meanwhile, you didn't choose that. I would use the opposite of, let's say, not the opposite. I want to contrast it with Jumia, for example. So on the Jumia website, you notice that you are given the opportunity to choose whether you want it to be at a collection point or whether you want it to be delivered to you. There are different delivery fees for each option. So with that one, it makes sense to me that Jumia is saying the goods have been delivered once it reaches the collection point, because I chose collection point. But with the Temu option, it seems like I chose one thing, I've given you my address, and the goods have reached a collection point and you're telling me that it has delivered.
So how does the collection points come in with the team? Like, so how do you know that your goods have reached that collection point?
So they send you a message when your goods are delivered.
Okay.
I know that this might be slightly different from when you're using the, let's say, Instagram stores, where that one you're communicating with the owner. But with these, let's say, larger retailers, they send you emails, they send you text messages. Sometimes you receive in-app messages that your goods have been delivered, or your goods are in transit, or your goods are on its way to the collection point. So my main issue here is, apart from everything, these are like practical issues that also come up when it comes to online transactions and online sales, that it goes beyond just you receiving something you didn't want or receiving defective goods or the scammers. But there's also the matter of data protection, because if I'm inputting my details, my address, my number, my name, because you are telling me you're delivering it to me directly,
and then give it,
and then it's going to a collection point. Why do you have my address? Why do you have my number? Because now you have all these details about me. Fine, you can say you have my number because you want to text me when the goods have arrived. You can still use the in-app messaging system or send me an email, because those are very key identifying details that can be used to hack any person. So I think when it comes to these larger retailers, they have to be concerned with it. And even if you are an everyday seller, if you are using collection points, you have to make sure that it is very clear. Give the buyer the option of choosing where the goods will be delivered to them, so that we can even clear the issue of what is delivery. At which point does delivery happen? Is it when it reaches the collection point, or is it when it reaches my door and and even that we're discussing at some points that, is it when it has reached my hand, or when the delivery rider is at my door and I come outside?
Exactly.
When does delivery happen?
That was what I was going to ask. But after you spoke of such serious issues of data protection, I feel my question is very insignificant to your very serious discussion on data protection. But I was literally about to ask that. So imagine the delivery rider is in front of, let's say it's a cake for your 50th birthday celebration, and the delivery guy he made sure that the cake has not been smashed. It has been protected in the box perfectly. He has gotten to your gate and it's about to deliver to you. Now, one little child in the neighborhood decides that that's when he's going to chase after his ball that has flown to your side. And so in the process of completing the exchange, the ball just hits the cake, and then the cake comes tumbling down. Then now the issue of risk and delivery and property passed when we all had one hand on the cake and one hand on this thing. Or at this point, we all just say whose child is this, and we all just go after the child. But at that point, someone has to bear the risk, because am I paying you? I'm not paying you.
Yeah, of course. Without this issue, which is like very difficult, nuanced issues that may need some agreement or further agreement or discussion between the parties. The issue of delivery comes with the issue of acceptance, because that is the obligation of the buyer. You pay for the goods, then you accept the goods. Okay. When it is delivered to you. That may also be subject to certain conditions. For example, if you see the goods and it's not what you wanted, although it was delivered to you, you can reject. It means you have not accepted. At that point, the risk will not pass, property will not pass. Right? But if it is the same thing that you ordered, then your obligation then will be to accept the goods. And if you don't, now the seller may also have some remedies against you for non-acceptance of the goods. So delivery comes with acceptance, which is an obligation of the buyer.
Okay, so let me piggyback on the issue of acceptance. So at this point, let's say when Amma got the phone, unfortunately, Amma wasn't in the house at the time the phone was delivered. And so Amma did not receive the phone, and she asked her 14-year-old, who this time didn't buy the phone, but that same 14-year-old was the one who received the phone. Is there a time frame generally? I know there is the issues of contracts where usually some will say specifically that if you don't return it in 1 day, or if you don't, that part is it. But is there generally a time frame where it will be deemed that acceptance has been made. So say Amma, the person has bought the phone, Amma has received the phone, tells the seller, received, thank you for your services. But Amma is not around, but she's only going off of what the son told her that, oh, mommy, the phone has arrived. And so also sends a message saying receive, which generally may look like quote and unquote an acceptance. Then Amma comes back from her trip and she's now unboxing the phone and is now realizing that, oh, battery health is deteriorated, camera is not in good condition, and all of those things. Then that's another.
Well, so all these rights and remedies, it's layered. So you need to go through the various layers to be able to determine whether you have a right that was breached, right, for you to seek any remedy. I may have done the physical act of acceptance, but maybe later after assessing, I may also communicate a rejection to the buyer that, no, this is not what I've ordered, right? So if I communicate that rejection, it's me telling the seller that I have rejected because the specifications have not met what I contracted to acquire from you. Sometimes I may just receive the goods and not say anything. Then in that case, the law would say reasonably, after some reasonable time, you are deemed to have accepted the goods. Sometimes the acceptance may be on conditions. In this case, we have 1 month warranty.
Yeah.
So that may be deemed as some form of condition that I have 1 month to assess the good, use it, and if anything happens, I have that right to seek some remedy, maybe a replacement or rejection. Yeah. So these are layered things that you need to go through, and you cannot just assess like your rights one time. Depending on the circumstances, you may, but in certain cases, you need time to be able to unravel all this thing.
Okay. So let's go to some practical issues of Amma trying to enforce her rights. We read from the fact scenario that the seller's page has now been renamed, or probably does not exist. What are some of the practical issues that someone who is trying to enforce his or her rights? Fantastic. At least from the discussions we've had, there was a contract. It looks like what she asked for was not delivered. All of those things. And freedom fighter, you are trying to, enforce my rights. I know my rights. But in this instance, how practical will it be for Amma to enforce the rights? Because we know from our experience that having a right does not always translate to easily enforcing those rights.
Let's take our shot. So let me start. I think at least at one point, we can say that at least maybe Amma would have, let me backtrack. The main thing is, do we have evidence? Whenever you want to, most times people say we want to go to court. That's why sometimes the lawyer is telling you, let's not go. Let's try other ways and means to get what you need. Because when you go to court, you need evidence. It's not just having, because everything we are going to court for, or whatever cause of action, there are particular elements we have to prove. We have to be able to tell the courts that X, Y, Z, right? For X, we have A, B, C, D as evidence. For Y, we have this, we have this. We have to be able to establish all those elements for you to say that, okay, you have breached the sale of goods contract, and so please do the needful, pay the damages. And so with this scenario, we can see maybe Amma would have probably her chats with Darlington Phones GH showing that there was offer acceptance, there was a contract. And then she'll probably have the phone which she'll bring to court and say, these are the problems with the phone. Of course, with an iPhone, she can just check on the settings section about these things, have that, and then she'll present that as well. But then there are a lot of other nuanced things that we've been discussing that because of how the transaction went, there are a lot of things that weren't as clear-cut as you'd like them to be, which means that you're going to be doing a lot of providing lots of evidence via oral discussions and things like that. And that's where there will be some roadblocks. Plus, when you go through, let's say, the usual court process, is quite long. The amount of money that she might be claiming, or in fact she will be claiming, is the 6,500 Ghana cedis she paid for it. Sometimes the quantum of the value of your claim can advise whether a lawyer will be telling you or pushing you to go to court or telling you to try other means of recovering that money, because realistically, you're going to spend about a year in court, because the courts have so many cases in them. Realistically, you're going to spend about a year in court trying to get this money back. And you're going to be spending money on your legal representation. Even as the person, you're going to be spending money on the transportation you use to go to court.
Filing fees. So many things come into it. So the practical issue is that when it comes to actually enforcing our rights by the courts, there are certain issues. Now, if you want to go to the police and say, this person did this XYZ, and so I'm coming to report them to cyber crimes, at the risk of not saying anything I think that the police are doing their best, but they do have their limitations as well as to what they can easily access when it comes to these online transactions, right? And how much they can track, because it's Instagram. Do they have all the capabilities and all the rights to be able to ask for
all those records now
Meta.
that their name has been, because you're not going to go and ask Meta that, please, we need this information. So we have to think about those practical facts when it comes to trying to enforce your rights. And that's why you have to always be vigilant. So both on, like, for example, in this case, we are looking at Amma because she's the one who has a phone that is damaged. And the seller is now saying, okay, I would provide you with a partial, I would fix the phone for you. But the way it has been couched means he's still expecting, he or she is still expecting Amma to pay something for the fixing of the phone, which means it's an extra cost to her. So I think in this case, that's why we would have negotiation. So your lawyer can say, okay, let's negotiate with the seller and say, no, this and this and this have happened. And so you are going to fix the phone for my client without them having to pay for it. Or you're going to replace it with the same type of phone that is actually working or meets the standards of what you said. So that's why usually we as lawyers would also, if your lawyer is telling you, oh, let's not go to court, it's not because they don't want to go to court, they don't think you have a good case, it's because we know the practicalities of what would happen in court, and they're finding alternative means of you getting your solution without having to actually step in a court. You must spend all the money that would lead you through that long process or over a year, and you will still not get what you actually wanted. Exactly.
Okay. Well, in defense of the court now, matters have been resolved in a relatively short period of time at the district court. Yeah. So I've seen plaintiffs or parties prosecute the case themselves. They do it with the assistance of the court. So I wouldn't say, I mean, ideally you should engage a lawyer. I would advise that you engage a lawyer. But with smaller claims, like 6,500 cedis, I have experienced or witnessed a case, they completed the case within 3 months. And she go ahead, one was even done within a month. Because so, in all fairness to the court, I would say that don't be totally discouraged if you feel your money is too small, because people are claiming as low as 500 cedis in the district court, and then they go. And also, regarding what Abina said, I think, I mean, aside the evidence, the first thing is finding him. I mean, you have to find where he is, his physical address, because he's changed, so he's more or less disappeared. The difficulty will be finding him. The cyber authority may perhaps be able to assist with finding. And then there are also ways, maybe there's a trick of saying that you want to buy another phone, you want to meet at an location. There are ways around this that you want to have, because then that way you can get his physical address. And it seems that if, as Abina said, the WhatsApp chat clearly shows there was a contract, and then if there's, maybe she's able to, the discussion regarding fit for purpose, if that can be proven to the satisfaction of the court. But we don't need to go to court first. I mean, as of now, there's always those preliminary discussions as to, okay, now you've done this, can it be repaired and those. But then let's say it's strictly adversarial. as I said, it will be finding him first, because if you are going to initiate any court action, you need to know where the defendant is.
Even who the party, because this Darlington phone GH right now, email address, everyone just, not everyone, but some people just put any name in creating the email address. They put any name, any date of birth, any telephone number, and just anything to get the required boxes ticked so that you can just create your address. So even if you're able to magically have Gmail and Meta and all those other platforms release information to you, the question is whether the name that has been used to create the account is even someone like.
It highlights the need for you to verify the identity when you're engaging in online transactions. Honestly, I won't buy from you if I don't know where you're physically located.
Right now, most of the shops are saying 100% online. Yeah, no physical presence, 100% online.
It's too risky if right now, if you pay for it. And also, I don't pay until I have received, unless it's an accredited. Maybe I recently bought from Temu. I must say I was disappointed, but at least I got something. I got something. So, but if let's say you are purchasing an item like a shoe or something, I think unless you can check the reviews, the transactional histories, and to confirm whether people have dealt with them, there are some credible business accounts that you can deal with. But honestly, I think the key thing is verifying the identity of who you are buying from. And then look out for red flags. Honestly, you can see the good. The deal seems too good to be true. And then they're selling an iPhone 17 to you, maybe 2,000 cedis. And then once I saw one on Tonatom, he said real airports. That's what iPhone airports. And then it was going for as low as 200 cedis, when at that time it was going for 3,000 cedis. So these are things that we should be looking out for as buyers when you're engaging in e-commerce or electronic commercial transactions, so that you know that at least you've mitigated the risk of being scammed. You won't find your seller. In this case, and she even got something. The guy is still even conversing with her regarding how they will go about it. There are instances when you pay the money and then you don't see them.
So I just wanted to jump on the Temu conversation. So now what happens when there's also cross-jurisdictional issues? So then that's another thing. The defendant is probably somewhere in, because even when it comes to like Temu like this, I'm wondering who has the risk, because I know there are different shops that are advertising on the Temu platform. So you'd have to know, is Temu just the platform with no risk that they are with the products, or is there a joint risk? Could you hold them vicariously liable because you bought it on? All those elements also come in, which I'm sure.
Which apply is a lot of things.
Which law are we applying?
Exactly.
And I think that conversation we can't start and finish
in one episode.
That's another discussion altogether. I want us to be wrapping up now. Just maybe any final thoughts on what you would advise our audience in terms of online transaction. I know our final discussion has really thrown some lights, but just any closing comments before we say.
So in line with what everybody else has said, it's about prudence. You need to at least verify the identity of who you are entering into that transaction with. Further step, try to verify locations, even if they don't have a shop. Like, where do you live? Where are you sending the thing from? Gives an idea, or get a description, landmark, so that if eventually you need to look for that person, you have somewhere to start from, right? If they have a shop, right, try to identify where the addresses. Look at the reviews from other people who have dealt with them. Fake accounts, they give certain vibes. So you just need to probe a bit further just to protect yourself. Yeah, so prudence is key in these transactions. Oh, I just also wanted to say that although like we don't have specific laws developed for online transactions yet, the traditional laws on sale of goods stay to a large extent are applicable and provide certain remedies.
Yeah.
But it would depend on how well positioned you are to be able to claim this. Right? If you can't find the person, how are you able to claim any remedy? If the agreement or reaching the agreement is not very clear cut, what the conditions are, what the terms are not really clear, then you know that you may, have a case, but it's kind of shrouded. You need to pass through certain things to even make your case. Then it just limits your chances. So prudence. Yeah.
So piggybacking off what Peter said, essentially, I'm always for evidence, so take screenshots. Every time I pay for something online, I take a screenshot. Even when the person says, oh, we've received it, I still have a screenshot just in case, which means that my phone memory is mostly screenshots of purchases I've made. Because I think maybe it's also a side effect of my job and the fact that I deal with so many disputes that you always have to have your evidence. So take screenshots of your chats with them. Oh, I want to purchase this. Use as clear, as he said, clear language as you can. So I'm buying this, the one in the picture, the one in the video. Let it be as specific as possible so that it makes it easier for whoever is going to assist you. Or as Christian explains, if you are the one in court, you have something concrete that the court can rely on. Now, my second issue is with data protection. Be very cautious when you're sharing your details online. As Christian said, I'm one of those people that prefer sites or online shops that says payment upon delivery, because I don't want to pay you and then I've lost that, or give you too many details regarding who I am and where I am. Try and limit the details you are giving to these people. If it's an online store, I don't see why they want if they're on Instagram, why do they want your email address? Because you are paying them. They might not even need your number. Of course, most of the time they'll need your number because the delivery rider has to call you. But now we have Instagram calls, and maybe your address. Try and find as neutral a location as possible. Sometimes I use a neutral spot and I walk from my house to the junction to pick up the goods. It's just how my mind works. So when it comes to data protection, let's be cautious. With some sites, they allow you to use Paystack and things like that. If the site doesn't have that third party, because those third party, let's say sites or websites have those protections that kind of block you and your details regarding your card numbers and your CV numbers and things like that, your security codes from the seller. There are some sellers that have these fancy websites, but don't use those third-party apps. And it's kind of dangerous when you're keying your card details directly into the system, because now they have your card details with them. So let's be cautious when it comes to our data protection.
You'll be deducting things. By the time you realize you have a lot of deductions in your accounts and you don't know where they are coming from, then you have to now be tracing.
So my final, one is advice to sellers. So aside maybe being potentially liable for breaching the terms of the agreement with the buyer, as Abina said, you could be liable for data breaches if you share data about, that's the buyer and it is not authorized by the buyer. You could be liable for doing that. And also my final words to the buyer, avoid juicy deals as much as possible. If it's too juicy, avoid it because you may end up, being scammed. So that is my final.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sure you've had a lot to chew on. This has been a very educative episode, and I'm sure that going forward, our audience will be more attentive when person accepts and buy and send and receive. You'll be more careful when using these type of words, even both for a seller's point of view and a buyer's point of view. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Do follow us on our social media platforms for more educative content and more legal information. Thank you so much. This has been the Litigator's Lens of BNP Associates Community First Podcast.